So mates, the next thing we're going to be doing is to cut out the fabric using the patterns. And since the underbust corset is going to be lined by the same fabric used for it, that is self-lining, since the underbust corset is going to be self-lined, I am going to have to cut a double piece of each, like 4 pieces of each pattern. Since this one on a normal ground, this is supposed to give us 2 pieces, but since I'll have to cut lining also, which is the same fabric, I'll have to cut 4 pieces instead. So this is, I folded it once, I'm folding it again. So remember, the center front is on fold. I'm going to just pin it down and then arrange the rest of them. The pattern pieces, and remember, we are going to cover the front part and also the center back of the corset with lace. So I'm just going to pick my center back piece and my center front piece, and then I am going to cut out this fabric as a layer on top of it. So the next thing we're going to be doing is that we're going to separate this to make it easy, very easy for you to sew this, since we have like 4 pieces of each pattern piece. We're going to divide it into 2 to give us our lining and main fabric. So I'm going to remove this and this. Make sure you do not take off the pattern from it while doing this. What I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to separate the main fabric from the lining so that I do not get confused when I start sewing. So the paper will go with the main fabric. So this is main fabric, lining. This is main fabric, this is lining. Since this is side front to center front, I'll pin both sides together automatically so that I do not make mistakes while sewing. So can you see? So we'll do the same thing for the side back. Since the side back is next, we'll detach the main fabric from the lining, 2 pieces each. Then this is side back, this is side back, this is the side seam. I'm going to pin. It's as easy as that, so you don't get confused while sewing. And also this side, I'm going to pin. Be very careful so you do not switch it up or you turn it upside down. So then the last one, which is the center back piece, I'm going to divide it into lining and then the main fabric. So this is it here. Like, look at the pattern well. Is this part that is attaching to the main fabric, so I do this and then I pin. So this is our corset. So it will be very, very easy for you when you start sewing. So what I did to this fabric here, what I did to the lining, I'm also going to do the same thing to the main fabric so that I don't get confused while sewing. So this is the final result for the pinning of our main fabric, and also this is the result for the pinning of our lining. Can you see? Do not mistake the top for the bottom. The waist is closer to the top than the bottom part. So this is it, and then this is it. So I'm just going to go straight to sew the lining together. I'm going to join each part of the lining together. The parts where I put my pin, I'm going to join them together, and then I'm going to show you the next thing to do. So before I head on to the sewing machine to join the lining, I have to cut a strip of this fabric. If you look at the design on the flyer closely, you see that there are pleats at the upper and lower side of the underbust corset. So I am going to cut a strip of 3 inches, and then I'm going to pleat it and then attach it. But before I go on to the sewing aspect, I'm just going to measure my 3 inches and cut out. So see what I'm going to do. I'm going to fold this so that I can have 2 pieces, one for the upper part and one for the lower part. So just going to fold, and then I'm going to measure 3 inches and mark. So these are the long strips. So while we're going to sew, we're going to fold it and then sew 1/2 inch inside. So guys, I have joined the lining, and here is the result. I joined all the pieces together and I gave it a good press. So the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to trim off all of these excesses. That's what I'm going to do right now. So the main reason why I'm going to trim off this excess is because I want to attach my boning. So I'm going to trim it off as close as I can. Note the boning is attached on the lining for this particular outfit. The boning is attached on the lining. Can you see how flat it is? I'm going to trim off all the sides and then show you. So here it is. I've trimmed off all the excesses. So I'm going to give it a good press. I'm going to iron it very well. I'm going to give it a good press, and then I'll show you what next to do. So the next thing we'll be doing is we'll take our bias tape. I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the class. You need a bias tape. So we'll take our bias tape and place it on this part, on the joining, or where the joining is, and then we're going to sew straight down on both sides. You make sure your seam is very close to the edge of the bias tape. You make sure your seam is very close to the edge of the bias plate of the bias tape. So that's what we're going to be doing all through these lines. And also, to add additional support, we're going to locate the middle of the corset. We're going to add the boning. So I'm just going to notch that part, and also the middle. This is the middle of the corset, the mid part. And then I know that I am going to attach a boning right here. So I'm also going to put my bias here. You understand? So that is, after I finish with that, then we will attach our boning to the lining. Remember, we are still dealing with the lining. We've not started dealing with the main fabric yet. This is just the lining. So I'm just going to go over to the machine and attach this bias to all these joinings, including the center parts. So guys, here it is. I have attached the bias at each joining and also at the middle part, as you can see, and then I have given it a good press. So before we attach our boning, there is one part that we shouldn't skip. At this end part, at the end part. So guys, can you see the first thing I did was to sew the bias 1/2 inch away from the center back. Can you see? 1/2 inch away from the center back. So I'm going to leave a space of 1/2 inch and then sew another bias strip. So guys, here it is. Can you see? half inch from the side seam, you sew a bias, you leave half inch, and then you sew another bias in between this line. Here, right here, is where our eyelet is going to sit. So before we go over to that, the next step is to insert our boning. Here's the interesting part. We're going to insert our boning. So there's a tip I would like to share with you guys. Can you see how neat it looks? As you sew, make sure you trim off all the excess threads. It helps a lot. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach my boning. So there's one trick that can be very helpful while you want to attach your boning. Can you see how it is bent? So what I did to make this a little bit straight, I gave it a press. I put it on the ironing table, and then I put a fabric on top, and then I pressed it, and then I drew it out. That it will make it more comfortable to work with, like it will make it easier to work with. So now back to attaching our boning. This is how you attach the boning. You try to straighten it, and then you turn it this way. And then you try to insert it into the bias strip. So when you see that it has gotten to the tip, you locate the length where it reaches, and then you pull out and then cut out 1.25 inches, like one quarter. I know why I said you should cut out one quarter instead of 1 inch, because by the time you cut out 1 inch, by the time you sew, the boning will try to come out of the clothes. So since you wouldn't want that to happen, I used them one quarter, that is 1.25, so that it will not poke out of the clothes. So I cut off 1.25 inches, because if I cut out just 1 inch, it will be too exact, because I'm going to sew off half inch here and half inch here. But to give it a little space to stay, I just cut out 1.25 so it doesn't poke out through the fabric. So while we are inserting this, since this fabric is going to be doubled and covered, there's no need to cover the tip of this particular boning. But if you're sewing this on a cloth, on an outfit, you need to cover this with a masking tape. It is very important. If not, it will start poking you through the skin, and you wouldn't want that discomfort. So since this is a double layer corset, there is no need to cover this up. You can just insert it through. But if it was the other type of boning that you can sew on, that boning you can use a bias to just cover the top part, or you can also use a masking tape to cover the top part. So can you see? I'm going to do the same thing for this side, so just watch it closely and you see how I do it. So I just locate where it stops. This is where it stops. I shift it forward and I cut off 1.25. And then let it stay in comfortably. Can you see? So this is our boning. So I'm going to do that to all the side. So guys, I've inserted the boning in all the parts of the lining. As you can see, can you see how neat, very neat it looks? Please make your work as neat as this, even neater than this. So can you see how I attached it? Then the only part that is left for us to do is just to sew up the main fabric like that. So the next thing we're going to be doing, remember how we pinned this? We are going to be sewing this up, but we are not going to be joining the side seam. And the main reason why we're not going to be joining the side seam is because of the belt buckle we are going to be attaching. You understand? So we're going to join all these parts aside the side seam. The side seam is the side, so we're not going to join, but we're going to join the other sides. And after we join the other sides, we're going to cover our belt buckle with fabric and then attach it to the front piece.